A lot of our guys, even our level, just put a puck on net without a purpose.
Yep.
Right in the belly, the goalie's belly. Now it's a face-off. We're not looking for second, third opportunities, or we're not shooting to score. I remember my dad always saying that to me. Shoot to score. It was every practice as a kid and all the way through. And a kid like Connor Bedard, he shoots to score. Now I know what he means through all that time. Maybe I should have listened more 30 years ago.
That was Dennis Williams, head coach and general manager of the WHL's Everett Silvertips, as well as the head coach of Canada's U20 national junior team gold medalist. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak.
Just watch me now.
Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolak, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolak, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak. My name is Jason Podolak, and I'm your host. And today you are in for a treat because we have none other than Dennis Williams on, two-time World Junior Gold medalist, first as an assistant coach and second as the head coach, the man guiding the ship of the Canadian World Junior team over in Halifax, where they were able to win gold in overtime in 2023. He is also the head coach and general manager of the Everett Silvertips. I believe he just completed his 5th season with Everett. He is a well-traveled coach. He went himself as a player to the NCAA Div 1 system. Upon completing his career there, he went on to be a coach, and he had to go where he maybe didn't necessarily want to go to start off with. And he covers that in this interview. He went to Amarillo, Texas, a place that he didn't even really knew existed, to start his coaching career. Ended up going from the NAHL up to the USHL and then over to the WHL. And now, as I said earlier, is an acclaimed coach in the Hockey Canada system. And by all standards is really earmarking himself for somebody that is destined for a promotion to a higher league. Dennis, as you'll hear in this interview, is super easygoing, really easy to talk to, great energy to him. Dennis and I had never met prior to this conversation. I like to announce that because there's no familiarity there for us other than this interview, and I think that the conversation speaks for itself, just how easy he is to talk to, how approachable he is, how willing he is to answer questions and to engage in discussions. And I think that's a testament to him, I'm sure, and the ability he has to communicate and be relatable to his players, and probably why he has so much success wherever he has gone. So credit to Dennis, credit to the human that he is, and and his ability and skill and communication. And I think that comes through loud and clear here in this conversation. We cover a lot in this interview. I believe, we're almost talking for 2 hours, which is another testament to Dennis about his willingness to give back to the game. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know Up My Hockey. There's no responsibility or requirement for him to do this. And we just talked hockey for almost 2 hours. We talked about his journey. We talked about his philosophies. We talk about Connor Bedard, who he had a chance to coach twice. We talk about the age of the WHL draft and the impact of birth year on players. We cover a lot of great, big, juicy topics, and maybe that's why the conversation was so easy and why it lasted so long, is because it just seemed like there was always another subject to engage Dennis on, and he was very willing to participate. So, yeah, nothing but great things to say about Dennis. I know that you're going to be a fan of him and hopefully follow the Silvertips after you've listened to this interview because, yeah, he's obviously one of the good guys. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to do his players right, and he's trying to do his coaching staff right. When you take care of the people around you, usually you get taken care of, and I think Dennis is an example of that. So without further ado, I bring you my conversation with the head coach and general manager and two-time gold medalist for the Canadian World Juniors, Mr. Dennis Williams. My guest today, Dennis Williams from the Everett Silvertips. Welcome to the podcast, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Pleasure to have you. Awesome to have somebody that's been in the World Junior circles as recently as this year in 2023 with a gold medal, and I think that you've also been involved at the U18 level, right, in the past. So some lots of work with Hockey Canada to date.
Yeah, it's obviously been a great experience. It's fun to be involved with, and obviously you're familiar with that yourself as a player back in the day. So I'm sure we have some good stories to talk about.
Yeah, no, for sure. I want to get into that for sure, because I am curious about even like the coaching selection process for that. I think there's probably others that would be interested too, is how that works with Hockey Canada and how you get in that stream. But I think maybe we'll just start. I think your story's interesting in the respect that like the coach journey is somewhat similar to a player journey, right? Like we have to start somewhere, and generally there's a goal of getting somewhere else. And that road can be a little windy. So maybe first as a player, you ended up as an NCAA player at Bowling Green, I think was your last stop as a player.
Yeah, that's right. My background's something of different from most probably coaches and players too. And I got to play junior hockey in my hometown of Stratford, Ontario, which is kind of neat because they used to be called the Stratford Coltons, rich tradition on moving a lot of players to the National Hockey League or going on to the National Hockey League. And then my brother coaches the team now, and they just lost in Game 7 of the Southern Cup Finals against Leamington. So it's kind of neat to see him back there coaching that group. But like you said, from there I went to Bowling Green, spent a little time in the Central Hockey League. I don't even know if it would capitalize as 5 or 6 games there, and I kind of knew that wasn't my calling, so from there I made my way back home for half a year, went back to school, did my graduate work back at Bowling Green. And from that point on, I knew I wanted to get into coaching.
So that when you dipped your toe into the pro circuit there in the Central League, you said, cup of coffee there. What was the indicator for you that just wasn't something that you wanted to grind out?
Well, it was kind of back in the day where there wasn't a players union per se, and I sustained a injury. And so I was in Odessa. Our coach at the time was a longtime coach, Don McKee. And he's been a figure in Ontario for a long time. Great guy. And I remember I was told I could stay and live there, but I'm not being paid. I was like, well, how's this work in my head? I was thinking, when I was 22 years old, maybe at the time or something. And so I knew from there I probably wasn't going to be a long-time pro. I took great advice at the time in college from my coach, Buddy Powers. He was one who told me to hey, just go give it a try. You have your college degree, put in your back pocket. You never know what might happen. I did it. I don't regret my decision going down there. It was a great experience, but it was short-lived. But as every door closed, another one opened. I was able to get back to my alma mater and pursue my graduate work, and then get right into coaching.
Awesome. So while you were playing, was that ever anything that was on your radar? Like, did you have an inkling for that, being behind the bench potentially at one point, or was it more a victim of just kind of opportunity or necessity?
Yeah, it was. Well, if you were to ask one of my old assistants, who's Louis Masters, assistant coach in San Jose right now, and he always said, I was classmates with him for 4 years. He always said, you always seem to want to be a coach. And I didn't recognize that. He said, just the way you would, meet with assistant coaches and kind of pick their brain. He goes, you could see it. Now, I thought coaching was kind of neat because at the time, Buddy Powers, Wayne Wilson, and Brian Hill, Brian and Wayne both coach at RIT, which was great. Is I just saw them working out with their great sweats all the time. Riding the bike. I was thinking, what a great job. And at that time, there was no video. It was a VHS player. There was no summer camps to run around to and pre-scout and watch players. And so I was like, oh, what gets better than that? I get to wear the gray on gray sweats, ride a bike and go out and run a practice. And I learned quickly that wasn't the case. But those guys actually were such great influences on wanting to get into coaching. A lot of it from, I think, how they treated me as a fourth line player. Because again, it allows me to really relate to players at all levels on our team, whether you're a top player or a bottom player. I've been able to play all those roles and to see how they treated me and their appreciation and their development model. I thought that was always important.
Yeah, super relevant. I love that you touch on that. How I think, as my experience as a player, and now as a coach at some amateur levels, that is the the ability to make people feel valued and valuable is pretty important. I think, especially in that head chair. Is that something that you like? Kind of, is that part of your core standard? I guess, as far as a coach, is to make everyone feel welcome and appreciated.
Well, I definitely think you have to be cognitive of it. It's easy just to kind of gravitate to your top players. That's the easy part is working with the older guys, the 19-year-olds, say in our league, off it, and the power play guys and whatnot. But it's really important that in our case here, we want players to have weekly meetings with the coach. Now, when you put that out right away, the veterans all come to my meeting because they know me and they've been around me for 3 or 4 years, and they bring their coffee in and they kind of tell me how things should probably go, as well a bit. But you notice the young guys, they gravitate to the room next to me, which is a common theme for a lot of young hockey players. So my biggest thing was making sure that at least every 3 weeks they got to come see me and sit down. And a lot of times when they come talk to me, it's really nothing to do with hockey. It's just how's home, how's school, how's your billet family, so that they can now build a relationship with myself too, because I think they're still intimidated to come into the head coach's office, as a 16, 17-year-old. And they tend to be, lower on your depth chart, just a lot because of strength, not some because of skill base, but just from a maturity level, per se. So I really try to make sure that all our players feel welcome, no different than when the draft gets done. And this is the culture we try to build here, is that I had our guys returning, asking for players' numbers to reach out to welcome them here to Everett. And it's something we've really stressed. And we want our guys, when they come in here, to know that it's not a separation or a hierarchy, depending on how many years you played here. We're one group, we're one team. And it's really important, but it starts with myself, that I make sure they feel comfortable here with our group.
Yeah, I always noticed that, felt that as a player. I mean, anytime you would level up or anytime you would get traded, wherever that case may be, like I would play better the more I felt a part of it, whatever that thing was, right? Whether it be a part of the room or whether it be a part of the system, and the piece of the puzzle that you're fitting in there, if it was clearly defined and recognized as something you could jump into, I felt that I would always perform better. And sometimes, like those guys, and I mean, you've been there as a player as well. Not everybody's happy because not everybody wants minutes, right? Everybody wants new responsibilities or different responsibilities. So, to align players with what it is that they can be and how they can be of value to the team and make them take pride in that. I think the coaches that do that well, I mean, really generally have a successful system. And credit to you, because it seems like you've been able to achieve that in many of your stops, and definitely in Everett. Do you delegate at all with your assistant coaches, as far as like, if there is the younger guys aren't really coming to you, do you say, hey, make sure you talk to Jimmy today? Like, I want to make sure that we have some touch points on him.
Oh, for sure. And they're the glue. They're the guys, and not just our assistant coaches. I really rely on our captains, our leadership group. So I'll pull them in. So I'll talk this year with our captain, Jackson Berezowski, who's now, as a 20-year-old, he'll move on. But him and I would talk weekly, and just to get a pulse, because he sees a whole different realm. And sometimes he'll tell me, hey, player XYZ is kind of down and out right now. This is going on. And I got to make sure I make that a focal point, whether he's left the rink, whether it's a phone call that night or a text, hey, come see me tomorrow, kind of like, and just try to let that player get whatever's on their mind off it, or how we can help facilitate that, and get them whatever they need so that they can kind of pick, clear up any part that's playing up in their mind. And a lot of it's playing time. They get a lot of pressure. And I did a thing on this once. Like, you think about what a kid at this level gets. They get pressure a lot of times from parents, mom, dad. They have people not pressure, but pulling, at them, or trying to get in their ear. You have agents, you got girlfriends, you got ex-coaches, and it's just everybody that kind of comes at them. And it's really important that I always say, like, if I had a son that played in this league, I'd want to put him in a position where I just try to support him. Now, I know all the, like, that side of it, because I've been in this level, and I know it's not easy. And I have daughters going through, and trust me, I'm sitting there at a 12U tournament, and but I'm just there to support and have fun right off it. And I'm not that, trust me. I sit there with my AirPods on, listening to a podcast, having my coffee as a dad in the corner, on it. And, but I really think they have so much people pulling at them. And the pressure when you get to the Western Hockey League is they all think, just like you mentioned, when you get from one level to the next, you think you're just going to step right in. They're used to being the top player. So how do they handle a healthy scratch? Who's having the next conversation with them after that? Because you can't just put up your lineup and have a kid get healthy scratch for the first time and not talk to him. They don't know which way to go. They're not know if they're getting sent home or what or why. So you have to nurture them. You have to, develop that relationship, explain to them why, and to know in our group here, everybody's role changes. But you'll decide when that role changes. You have to put in the work and the effort. And then when your role does change, you got to be ready to make that jump, know the system, know the tech pack. So we put a lot of onus on our players off that, but our coaches do such a good job, and it may be, hey, you know what? I think he needs a little one-on-one time with you, Willie, with some video. I've had him for the last 3 weeks. You can just see he just needs that little bump, and hey, absolutely. Make sure you put on the schedule tomorrow to have player XYZ come see me, and I'll pull up his, 5, 6, 7, 8 good shifts to try to build him up. And hopefully when he leaves here, he feels much better.
Yeah, that as you were talking there, I was just reflecting on my conversation with Jerome McGinley, talking about his time in junior. We played at the same time. Actually, you and I think are fairly close to the same age, but Jerome was 1 year younger than me as far as birth year is concerned. So I had to battle against him with Kamloops, and that juggernaut that was there back in the 90s. And Jerome played like 48 games, I think, or something as a 16-year-old. And he said like he would get 2 shifts in the first period, 2 shifts in the second period, 1 shift in the first half of the third. And then if they were winning or losing, like maybe he'd get a regular shift after that. And then he was getting healthy scratch too. And he said he didn't really it was really hard, right? So here's Jerome again, like 1,500 NHL games, Hall of Famer, right? Not being able to play as a 16-year-old. And then Hazer came to him and said, "Hey, this has nothing to do with you as a player, nothing to you as your value to the team, but this is just our system. This is our culture. This is what Shane Doan did last year. This is what Darcy Tucker did before you. This is the way this works right now, and I want you to understand the league." And he said like that. And I mean, we're talking the 90s now, right? So that was a lot of communication for the 90s, right? For a coach to sit with you in the crowd and say that. And he said that had such a massive impact on him that allowed him to, to move forward and to understand and to really appreciate where he was at. And the next year when he had the minutes, that he was grateful of those minutes. And I think that, there is value in that, to stepping into a hard league, to try and figure it out, to have the challenges there. But I think it also is nice when that coach is there to let you know why and how the system works.
Yeah, and everybody, as you know, makes an adjustment at different times. So we had a player this year, Jesse Heslop. He's a 2006, played in our top 6 all year. Now, he's probably in my 5 years here, 6 years, the first player as a first-year player like that to do that. Now, a lot of it played into his opportunity. He's a very skilled hockey player. He can make plays. He's physically not there, so I had to make sure I support him around 2 older guys that can kind of drive the bus, for him right now. And I think it will pay dividends moving forward with the type of year he had for us, obviously. And the makeup of our year was I made a trade at the trade deadline too. And this year, I believe we were the youngest team in the Western Hockey League on average age. And so it gave a lot of these guys the opportunity to step in and get thrown into the fire. We're in the playoffs this year against Portland. We have a 6-on-5 and we have a 07, we signed Julian Mays, and he's on the ice 6-on-5. I have him out there as an 07. Now, he's not going to win one battle physically, but he set up a play backdoor to Caden Zaplitny on our team. It was an unbelievable play. Zapper just missed it, but to see his vision and his skill set, that's why he's out there. Are we going to win all games with him playing that much ice? Probably not, often, because it is a strength. And in our league, we're younger. We draft, like this year we had the 08 draft, and when you're talking about an 07 coming up there going against a 20-year-old, I'm watching the Seattle team right now playing our league, like that. Just they're all men, often, and so you're in different wavelengths. But I do think the big part is the communication, you do have to get them in reps. I know some guys want more ice time, and probably just like you said, a lot of us still, it's a fine balance. We're here to win and we're here to develop. You got the two responsibilities, because you have a responsibility to the player and to your organization to develop. You just can't go and get players. It's not like when I was in the USHL or the North American League, we draft 50 kids every year. I could just go out and grab those players and get the best out of the BC Alberta League that already 18, 19 and bring them in. So you really have to develop with it. But then you also have the winning side, the culture side. You have a business side. So, it's a two-headed dragon, kind of how you got to balance that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because they definitely converge too. Because if you're in a market, especially with this day and age, I would imagine it seems to me like the players I work with and the parents that I'm around, it's very, very player, my kid focused, right? Like it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to tell them that a challenge is actually something that you want your kid to have. But yeah, I mean, if you don't develop your kids very well, then it's harder to get them at 16. It's hard to get them at 17, right? So you have to have some type of a system there for sure. And I see that at the BCHL level too, like guys that'll bring in, let's say, committed players to NCAA programs and then let them go from their team. I mean, and bring in a WHL cast off. I mean, you do that too many times, you're going to stop having players come in as well, right? So you have to definitely have to be careful. I understand the balance there. It's pretty hard to manage sometimes, I'm sure. Since you brought it up, I was going to save it, but I definitely want to talk about that trade. So yeah, you made a trade at the deadline, small trade.
Yeah.
And so for those that were listening, and if I'm sure you'll remember better than me, but this is what I wrote down. So Zellweger, who was one of your stars at the World Junior team, a player for you for quite some time, and obviously one of the best major junior players in the CHL, goes to Kamloops for 4 first rounders, a second rounder, a third rounder, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and 4 other young prospects. Did I get that all right?
Yeah, and then we also gave the forward, Ryan Hofer, who's a Washington signed.
And he's a good
player
player
in there.
too.
Yeah, Hofer.
Yeah.
Real good, yeah.
So, okay, so two good players. I just wonder, I would love, can you give me how this negotiation worked? Because when Kamloops says, okay, we'll give you 2 first rounders, and you're like, no, I need 3.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm not taking 3, I need 4.
Yeah.
It just seemed crazy to me. It was a truckload of stuff, right? How did that start and how did it finish?
Well, the difficult part was a lot of teams were calling because we had probably 4 or 5 teams that really separated, I thought, in the Western Hockey League, that was kind of making those moves or putting themselves in a position to win the not only the Western League but the Memorial Cup. So the hard part was during the time at World Juniors, is that I've kind of told everybody I'm not going to discuss anything till I get back. So we win on, I think, Thursday. I'm at the airport Friday. My phone's blowing up. Not even 12 hours after we just won in Halifax, and I waited to the end of the day. I flew home with my family, my wife and kids, and from Halifax. And Saturday, I spent a good bulk of that day on the phone, probably 10 hours worth of kind of going back. Now, the thing I wanted was to make sure I put them in the right position. And not saying any of the other teams, but obviously Kamloops being host, these are 2 players, Olin and Ryan, that have been unbelievable people for us in this organization. Not only take what they've done for us on the ice, what they do off the ice. They're mentoring of our young players. They're both unbelievable stories, where Zellweger's a second rounder, came in at like not even as tall as my desk, probably, when he showed up at camp, off it, and never made the under 17s, got invited back after in regards to being cut. And then they had some injuries or sickness. He got added, and then he was at the Helenka for them. And then World Juniors, he's an unbelievable player. And then Ryan was a kid we listed who was never drafted in the Western Hockey League, and got him to come in and played during his bubble year, the 24 game season, and then gets drafted by Washington and signs with Washington. So unbelievable guys. But my biggest thing was when we made that trade was I didn't just want to trade him anywhere. If I was going to move him, I want to put him in a spot that they were guaranteed to have that opportunity. And obviously Kamloops and talking to the GM, Sean Klusen at the time, they obviously had a lot of interest in both those players. So there was definitely some talk back and forth on the negotiation side. Probably somewhere it got a little nitpicky, probably more on our end because we really value those guys, and obviously when the trade came out, people all thought at the end of the day that was unbelievable on Everett's side. But I also think they've done an unbelievable job for Kamloops, both those guys. And it comes into, as you know, being a pro hockey player, it's this supply and demand model at that time. Who's got the assets? And to be honest, I wasn't even sure I was going to do it. Like I sat there almost, was I gonna? And neither player requested a trade. Neither player came in saying, "Hey, Willie, it's my last year. We're a few games above 500. Seattle, do you think I?" None of them. So I met those guys. I called them. I met them in person at different times. They're obviously, they probably heard all the rumors, right? So, but it was a tough day. It wasn't it wasn't a fun day. I was really, because the coaching side of me came out saying, wearing both hats. Hey, we keep these two guys and we have these other guys mixed in. Hey, we're still okay. We can make a little bit of a run here and see what happens. But to put the organization in a good position for the next, 5-6 years and give those guys the opportunity, I thought it was the right move.
Yeah. Well, that's really admirable of you. I love the fact that you wanted to get them in that, they're going to be at the dance, right? Regardless of whether they won or lost. And now they didn't win, but they're still going to be going there. And yeah, I mean, and that's the game too, right? I mean, two GMs trying to do what's best for their players and for their teams. And, Kamloops, went big, right? They went all in, obviously, and they're hoping to win a championship this year. And sacrificed a bit of the future, in order to do that. And that's what you have to do sometimes, right? Especially when you got a guaranteed berth there. So I can kind of understand it. The thing that blew me when I was thinking about that, and then I was like, from the GM side, that everyone wears the GM hat every once in a while. And I was like, boy, like if I was Regina's GM, like you are not going to get Connor Bedard back. Like that's guaranteed. Like Olin and I mean, who knows, right? These Hofer, it might be that are they both leaving for sure next year? Zellweger and Hofer?
Well, Hofer is a 20-year-old, so he's out, and Zellweger is assigned, so he can go to the American League. If not, so
gotcha.
The likelihood would probably be no.
Right. So my thought was like, you're not going to win them. They weren't. I didn't think Regina was deep enough, right? I know they were selling out Barnes and all that stuff, right, because of him being there. But goodness, would you have entertained that? Like if you had that hat on, would Bedard been on your trade list, or would you have thought that he just can't be touched?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? And it's easy for us to look from afar, and like anything, and be like, how do you not get 5 first or whatever it is? You probably name whatever you wanted,
right.
And you're going to get it. But at the same time, getting to know Connor at the World Juniors, you can really tell just how great of a kid he is and how loyal he is. And, when everyone was, I could read all the Twitter accounts and everything, and I really feel like he's the type of guy that, that's where he's played and wants to play his junior career. I think there's something to say about that as well. And to be able to wear one jersey your whole time and be able to start your career there and end it there and to the team that gave him the opportunity. So, I don't know. I'm glad. Well, twofold. I'd obviously be great to have a player like that, but I'm glad I didn't have to make that decision.
Just a short break from the conversation with Dennis to tell you about some exciting things happening at Up My Hockey. And there are a lot of exciting things happening at Up My Hockey, one of which is the UMH68. The UMH68 is a tournament that I am going to be hosting here, in a couple weeks' time in Vernon, British Columbia for 2009 born BC hockey players. Whether you played private or whether you played in the BC hockey system, this was an invitational concept that I had leaving the BC provincial tournament, where my son Hudson was playing. And I just felt that there should be another step at this age where we can include the top players from the provincial tournament and also include the top players from the private leagues, which in this case in British Columbia is the JPHL. And I was like, I'm going to do it. Turned out that the ice was available. Turned out that this thing started falling into place, and we are going to have the inaugural UMH 68. I already have ideas for how to improve it for next year. Would like to bring in a Northwest United States component, 17 players from there, bring in the 17 players from the private leagues, and also have the top 34, 36 from BC Hockey, and have a 4-team weekend experience that is just a best of class type of experience. I'm getting NHL alumni coaches in. We're having a WHL scout talk about how to prepare for the draft year ahead for these players. We're having a player banquet. There's going to be a parent social at the host hotel. Everything that a tournament should be, this is going to be. Again, invitational only. It's going to be broadcast with an announcer. We're doing things right here, the Up My Hockey style. So I'm really excited about this. So this is the U15 level in British Columbia. I know there's quite a few listeners here in BC. This is also something that I'm going to be planning for U14 and U13. That's going to be Pee Wee Major and Pee Wee Minor birth years. So for this year, that will be 2011 and 2012. And so you can watch for that coming up. It'll be an invitational, like I said, trying to attract the top players across all leagues in British Columbia for a weekend extravaganza in June or late May. And I'm really excited about it. I think the concept just lies perfectly with what Up My Hockey is, about offering a holistic development experience and about trying to be your best and bringing like players amongst themselves to challenge each other and push themselves is a direct correlation of what My Hockey is all about. And it's also filling a void for what doesn't exist right now in the BC hockey landscape, a place where players from private leagues, from BC Hockey, can come together to challenge themselves, to push each other, to meet new friends, and to experience the game at the highest level possible. So super excited about the UMH 68. Again, the premise is the 68 players, 4 teams of 17, 9 forwards, 6D, and 2 goalies. And yeah, that equals the 68. This year we're going to have 3 full-size teams, which is super exciting. This all came together in like 2.5 weeks, so I am definitely biting off a big piece of something that I knew nothing about. But I've been a part of a ton of tournaments before, obviously as a player. I've been a part of a ton as a parent. I know what works. I know what doesn't. I know what players want. I think I know what the parents want. Trying to provide a great value and trying to provide an experience that just is unlike any other in the market today. So so watch out for that. If you're a West Coast Canadian or either a Northwest U.S. player, I have already made contact with a lot of association presidents saying this is what I'm going to be looking for coming up in the fall. Are you interested? The answer has been yes. We would love to recognize our players and have them be recognized in an invitational type format. There will also be an application format at upmyhockey.com if you want to be on the watch list for your player to get invited to either the U15, U14, or U13 version of the UMH 68. By all means, that will be happening. And there will be a lot of content on social media about the UMH 68, the inaugural event here in a couple weeks, Father's Day weekend. And and I can't wait to share. If you want to watch, there is the UMH 68 Facebook page newly created, so all games will be live streamed there. It's also where you can get in touch with us that you would like to be part of the mailing list and be part of the experience. So by all means, get involved. And we look forward to offering it in 2024 to all 3 age groups. So without further ado, I bring you back to the conversation with Dennis Williams. So Hockey Canada, we'll get to the 2023 championship. You were at the 2022 as an assistant coach, but then you're also, I think your first, when you first dipped your toe in the water was at the U18 world team level. How, just maybe talk to us about that, like getting into that ecosystem. Was that something that you always wanted to do, and how that happens as a coach?
Yeah, well, it started way back. I got involved with the under 17s right after my first year. I was coach of under 17 since 3 teams. So I filled out the application and put my name in, and I got one of the teams, Team Black at the time. They take Team Black, Team Red, Team White. And my former assistant, Mitch Love, who's the Calgary Wranglers head coach in the American League, he was already involved with Hockey Canada, so he was a bit in front of me on it. And I was asking him about it, and so I got into it, and I really enjoyed it. Like when you get to coach the best players of this age, it's fun no matter what role you're in, And I know we all want to go as head coaches because that's what we are, but I was able to do that at the under 17s. At the under 18s at the Helenka, I was an assistant. And it was the first time I'd been assistant forever. And I was really nervous about that. I'm like, what? And my personality, like I didn't know if I fit that role or, because really you want the players to gel, but the staff has to gel. You have to accept your role, just like players do. But we had an unbelievable staff. Mike Dick was our head coach. Mario Duhamel, who's in Arizona, was the other assistant, myself. And we had a great staff, and we were overseas for that event. And I learned a lot. And what I really learned was an appreciation for assistants.
Right.
Because I left that tournament stressed about making sure I got Mike Dick all the information he needed, right? And systems, I'd be the one up late with the laptop, and actually learning more how to code games and break it down yourself and put presentations together, because normally, as you have your assistants do it. So I was doing that. So I really learned a lot, and I thought that really prepared me, for the opportunity to go to the World Junior staff with Dave Cameron, and Mike Dick was back on the bench, and Louis Robitaille and I, and what a great experience. Hockey Canada has done nothing but given me a great opportunity, not only to coach the best players in the world, but to meet unbelievable people, to learn from them. I go there every time to try to steal stuff. That's what coaches do. We're just out there to find different ways to coach, to educate, and then we just bring it into how we want to do it. So I don't know there's too many things we really invented as coaches this day and age. It's just about grabbing it and tweaking it. So the relationships from there, the opportunities that they've provided, it's been awesome. And obviously to the capsule of it's been the last 2 years at the World Juniors, both in the summer and then this year in Halifax.
All right. Yeah, that's great. So it is, to start to get your foot in the door, it's actually an application process. Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's what I did. 5 years ago, I did an interview with a bunch of hockey guys through Hockey Canada at the time. I think it was it might have been the World Juniors manager at the time, and so forth. And and prep your all your work and do all that. And you coach all your life, and then you go do an interview like that, and you're pretty nervous, for your first go around, because the one thing I will say is that what I found is being in Hockey Canada is just I've been with all those staffs, and they've been like now friends for life. And I know that's easy to say, but whether it's I'm talking to Al Letang and Sarnia this year, or Steph Julian, or Brent Kissio and Lethbridge, like we're texting, talking, sharing clips from the winter. Like you're together for so long, and I think what has made my enjoyment with Hockey Canada so well is the staff members I've been working with, and we haven't had one person stray. Which is it's easier to have a guy stray than not. Like it's hard to get 4 alpha males like that in one room that all coach. Some are GM coaches, and you're strong opinionated, but I've been really lucky and fortunate. Like I said, it's been awesome, my experience with them. And it's not just because we won the 2 goals. We won silver with the U18s. I wouldn't trade that experience either. That was an unbelievable event and a real great opportunity.
That's great. Yeah, I remember from my experience winning, and I'm sure it would be the same if you didn't win. Although I'm just speculating. I only played once, right? And we were able to win it. But like everyone on that team, and there has been different points in the last few years where you get in touch, and it's like you stay connected, right? There's definitely a bond there. There's something special about coming together as a group and wearing that sweater and accomplishing something cool that ties you. So I can totally relate to that. And as a coaching staff, it's I don't know what it would be. I mean, obviously there's a different level of feeling with that, because you are your own separate group, right? I mean, the players are the players group. Yeah. You're part of that group, but you're a little bit separate, right? But you have your own little group there that you're battling and doing your stuff to get the players ready, and obviously everyone comes together and does it together. But that would be, I would imagine, where you feel most of your bonds would be with your coaching staff. Obviously you're going to remember the players forever too, and who coach there. But the people you're up drinking coffee with and having a beer with after the game are the guys that you're going to the war room with, right?
I'll tell you spend more time there. They're long days, and you wouldn't trade them, because it's such a short-term competition, as you know, and the build up to that event, it's slow rolling, and then when it hits, it's like it's over. and you and to me, the 6:30 coffees are the best times because you're not yet talking hockey. So that's when you're really just talking about family, kids, how's your family back home, and you're having your breakfast before you head over to the rink and whatnot. But it's and I think it's really important for the staff to assimilate and buy into the roles because again, we ask these players, they're all high end picks. They're all players coming from, their teams where they got 100 points and you're asking a guy to be a fourth liner and accept a role. So we as a staff have to accept whatever we get. And the one thing is we wanted to make sure like this past year, and I learned this with Dave Cameron, is you have, the three coaches on the bench and you have another head coach who's the eye in the sky. But for our practices, like I wanted to make sure every coach was involved. Everybody had responsibilities. And I didn't ever look at a coach because he was the eye in the sky versus an assistant coach. I looked at him as an assistant that, excuse me, that could contribute right away to our group. And any one of those coaches at the Christmas one could have been the head coach. Like, I say that all the time. So it's it's quite an event. It's stressful. Someone asked me this, and you as a player, this would be a good question and be a little bit different. And probably as a player, it's joy. But someone asked me, was it joy or relief after you won? Like being in Canada, you lose game 1 to Czechia. You go to overtime. You're up 2-0 that game, kind of in full control. They score right away there to make it 2-1. The next goal goes off Del Mastro's legging in. That was going to go into the corner probably, and now you're going to overtime. And someone asked me that, like, was it enjoyment after or relief? And I had to think about it. It's probably just a sign of relief. Like I didn't enjoy till I got home per se, of it because of the pressure. But we as coaches, we want that pressure, off it. But it was a great question someone asked me. And I never thought of that way. So it's it was nice to finally get that goal for everybody and get back to Everett.
Yeah, I mean, there is a different. To step into that chair, that you stepped into, it's a massive opportunity, right? Like it's kind of a dream job, right? To, like you said, to be around those players, to be leading the ship there, but it's also a massive responsibility and huge expectation because every year it's essentially gold or bust, or it's like, deemed to the public as being a failure. I mean, I hate using that word, especially with what I do as a mindset coach, right? But, the public perception is that you didn't achieve what you were supposed to achieve. So from that standpoint, yes, I totally understand where you're coming from because, there is a massive amount of expectation. There is a lot of pressure. And the fact that you got it done is like, oh, thank God. Right. And then it's like, oh, yes. And we did it. And then you can celebrate and be joyful about it. But I imagine from the coaching staff, I think would feel that probably more than the players. I think like I remember us feeling it, but there's a group, right? Like there's a group of us, there's 19 of us. And I guess in my scenario, there was no Connor Bedard really that maybe would wear the pressure of success more than anyone else, right? We were kind of just all of a group going about to do our stuff. But with the coaching staff, like I said, there's 2, 3, 4, and only one's the head coach. Only one takes the blame or can celebrate the success. Yeah. So I can imagine for you, it's probably a different level of both those things, probably joy and relief.
Yeah, and the way we won it, we lose game 1. And it was
that like? So after game 1, so you go back and you're in the coach's room, and what are you guys saying in there?
Well, I was probably as white as this shirt. I was probably, I was like, oh, I can't be that guy, can I? And because you feel it. What the Al Miller and Scott Salmon came in, who oversee Hockey Canada there, and I remember Scott Salmon and Al both saying on the way out, "Hey, Willie," and one grabbed me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, if you're going to lose any, lose this one." Like it's not you'd rather lose this one than the last one. And it wasn't. They really tried to mitigate any of the pressure. Which then you flip it from a coach. How do you try to do that for your players? So really, they're the coach. I'm their player. Kind of out of it, and they did it. I don't know if they realized what they said or what it meant, kind of. And it wasn't until I went to bed that night I was thinking about that part of it. But the part that was difficult was we had a day off, so you had a whole day to think about it. Like it's not like we could get right back at it in a short-term competition and drop it. But I think it was kind of what we needed. And I say that, and everyone says that, but I say that in a way that, do we want to go 7-0, 100%? everybody wants to win every hockey game you play, but I was able to capture that group pretty quickly, from that. Unlike when you played, everyone's on their phone. So they were probably doing nothing but reading about how great this team was supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
Off and up to that point. So everyone's reading the tweets, and we got Gunther back and Clark back and all these guys back, from the NHL, and you mix that in with Connor Bedard, and we got Shane Wright back as our captain, and it was good, and it kind of captured everybody's quickly. It wasn't that they weren't working or trying, it was just kind of a reality check. And from a coaching standpoint, when the tournament's done and the way it ended up, I'm selfishly glad I had to go through that now, because I've never had to go through that media after the answering of those questions, the next day questions. When you talk about NHL guys not watching TV or reading anything, I definitely shut everything right off. Like, I was in my own world. I probably the one thing that helped me throughout it all was my wife and kids were out there. So I had my girls and my wife with me. So that brings you back to reality again, and brings a sense of calmness and understanding what really matters. And then, I was able to get up the next day, and I didn't sleep a lot off that day, and was able to get up, and we put together a plan. We made some lineup moves, and from that point on, but it's still not easy. Like, we beat Slovakia in overtime, out shooting them 40-18 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And you know how it is. You get there and you get a hot goalie, and it doesn't take much. So it's it was a great experience. I'm real glad that it ended up the way it did, obviously, but some of the trials that we face, I think, will only help me from a coaching standpoint as I move forward.
Right. Yeah, because you have to rally, right, for sure, and you have to have some type of a solution. Like, I mean, the day off, right? Like, so you guys are sitting in there, so some lineup changes. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Well, I can't remember that game specifically, but I think it was a little bit loose defensively too, right? Like, there wasn't some great coverage. So you have these top guys obviously coming in, and they haven't necessarily maybe had to play as much solid defense. So now there's a wake up call there, and you probably add some structure to that group. And I think that type of direction with the plan for the guys that say, hey, yeah, I mean, we're going to move forward. This is how we're going to move forward. Gives everyone a little bit of purpose. And like I say, I mean, that's a tough tournament. Man. That's a tough tournament. And, you flip a coin in those overtimes, and you never know. Mm-hmm. But it became so memorable, right? I mean, that Connor Bedard overtime goal is going to be like, what, 30 years or so going to be playing that one, right? It's going to be like that Eberle goal there against Russia. I mean, 15 years earlier, the Tavares one. Like, there's some epic moments in Canadian World Junior history, and that was obviously one of them. And you couldn't get him off. You couldn't get him on the ice anymore, I don't think. I remember watching him, and like, how do you not, right? But like, I was wondering how you would manage that, even like that lineup. Everyone has there are go-to guys in every lineup, and they're all great players among themselves. But he was seeing a lot of ice, and obviously you kind of felt like you just had to have him out there.
Yeah. So when you get to that overtime, it's the one thing with Canada is we have a lot of elite skaters and elite playmakers. So it allowed us to utilize some different looks. And even if you look at, like, when we got to the game against Czechia in the final, I ended up making some roster moves there, lineup moves, and moved Adam Pintelli down a little bit in the lineup, but yet I had him out in overtime because of what he can do with more ice, more time, more speed. So, but going back to that game with Slovakia, I remember Dave Cameron always telling me, Willie, if you coach here in the World Juniors, you always go with your gut. You're here for a reason. You go with your gut, at that time. And my gut was, he kept looking like he could keep going, in terms of Connor, out there. And then you mix in whether it's Dylan Gunther, Shane Wright, or, any of those guys. I'm just naming, like, you could have put any out there, but, Connor kind of had that hot stick, and he lives for those moments. And you could see him coming out like he's ready to go right back out, and he's the only guy wearing the full cage, the bubble there and whatnot. And so I was like, all right, let's go, Bedsy, and you'd put him out with Stan Colvin, who's another skilled, fast player there with Kamloops. And they really gelled together, him with Wall, the forward there from Sherbrooke. Like, that line was really dominant throughout the event. So when you get into that short-term overtime, I've always said, let's just go with our horses at that time, and or who was feeling the puck, and those guys were.
Was he ever? My gosh, like that was super impressive, and I just loved his interview at the end too. Like it was something in respect of, like, I think he had like whatever 5 shots in overtime. He was doing his toe drag, and the goalie was stopping it or was getting blocked, and he's like, "Well, I couldn't shoot by scoring," so he ends up walking 3 guys and goes around it with one of those epic highlight reel goals. My favorite goal of his the entire time, just from a personal scoring standpoint, which I thought was like incredibly elite, was that one where he was almost on the goal line and the puck was in front of him. It was in the round robin, and he, like, it was the quickest release under the bar, over the shoulder, short side. I just thought that was like immensely special. You remember which one I'm talking about?
Yeah. And I think, did he point at that one? Did they count it right away? Was that the one? I'm trying to think. There's one that he scored too, short side, right off the head, kind of over the shoulder.
Yeah, I think that was the one.
They kept going, and he was like, "That went in."
Yeah, It went in and out super quick, right? And I don't think anyone in the building thought he was going to shoot it. But it's that release of his that's just bonkers. Like, for you, I guess now, that was going into that tournament. Everyone thought he was going to be number one. At the start of the year, there was supposed to be a battle between him and maybe Fantilli. And then I think that tournament obviously put everything to bed. And then what he's done since in the playoffs and everything else it's kind of a no-brainer who Chicago is going to pick. But what's your take on what you saw there from a 17-year-old Connor Bedard, the way he dominated that level, and maybe what you think his impact could be in the NHL?
Well, what was really neat was being able to see his maturity and development from the summer one or the winter one the year before, when COVID canceled it. Because if you remember back then, he was kind of like the 12th, 13th forward. Yeah. He kind of started, and just, it's an older tournament, as you know. It's they're men out there. It's hard to do what you think you can do. So to see what he was able to do, his mindset and his approach, and he was a player that, everyone just talks about his offensive side. I saw parts of his game defensively drastically improved from what I remember from a year earlier, and was conscientious about it, and I think that's what really just showed his maturity and the growth of his game. But his ability, like even in practice, watching him shoot pucks, like it is the whip on that stick, and how hard he I try to explain this to my daughter. Like, she goes down and shoots. She's 10 years old. She's 11, and she's been able to be at these events, and Connor's her favorite player, like every kid playing hockey right now, probably out there. And, but like, to see how hard he shoots every time. And he's your typical guy that if you're doing a goalie warm-up drill, he's not out there to warm him up. Those goal scorers, they go out there to score. Like, I'm not just going to put one in the glove for this. I'm coming in, I'm ripping them, because that's how his mind, thinks. But he last guy off the ice all the time. Him and Olin Zellweger were like, you're blowing the whistle because at the IHF, you have a certain amount of ice time. You got to get off otherwise. And those are the two guys you're all over. Like, let's go. And it's him out there. So more doing it. But what he was able to do at his age, to be able to see that throughout the event, and then more so what he was like off the ice. He's just a kid, like you wouldn't even know. Like, he's down there having, lunch or dinner, and he's just playing ping pong, right? Like nothing, and I think that's so remarkable, and how he could handle it. I don't even know how he handles it. I really don't, because, you think about what he had to do in Regina all year. Every rink he went to was sold out, as we know. And everybody wanted media, autographs. If he went out in a game and didn't get 2 points, it was like a down game. Like, people would be like, oh, Team XYZ shut down Bedard. He only had a goal and assist tonight. Kind of like it's just remarkable, I think, what he's been able to do. A lot of people have asked me that question about him at the next level. And, I just, he's too good of a player, like, to not keep doing what he's doing. And I think to go with that, his work ethic complements that. Like, he's an like to hear the stories in the summertime, his training, and like, he just invests in himself. Like, he just loves scoring goals, but even more so, he loves winning, and you can really see that at the end, like, right. To like, even him saying, after back-to-back goals, Willie, on the, like, they're so excited to have that, to be able to say that, and where you think a kid at that age would just be, hey, I had X amount of points, and it's about, but he truly, like you said in the interview, hey, I'm not here to talk about myself, right? I think you said something along those lines, like, we just won gold. I'm here, and I don't think he didn't get a point in that final game, and to him, I really don't think that mattered to him. And that it's all about winning, and I think those are characteristics of him that a lot of people don't realize is the work ethic, how he is trying to hone out his whole details away from the puck, instead of just being known as this prolific goal scorer, playmaker, because his deception's next best. Yeah. Because you gotta respect the shot, but his ability to keep that puck in an area where he can shoot, dish, cut back, pull, like it is. I just got to watch it up close on the bench. Everyone watching on TV, like some of the goals he scored, I was just like, wow, I remember turning to Brent Kissel. I'm like, we can't teach that, So, but he's going to have a really bright future, definitely in the National Hockey League.
So would you tag him generational? Like we're looking at the next Sidney Crosby kind of Connor McDavid scenario?
Yeah, like I know it's hard. I definitely put him in my experience in 6 years in this league. I haven't seen anybody remotely close. And what he's been able to do at his age, it's even more impressive. Like when I'm talking about that, I'm watching players that have played at this level as 18, 19-year-olds, and have really good already started pro careers. I just hope, for him, it's again, having to deal with all that extra social, the whole media, the circus that's going to go around it, I guess, that's a lot. You always think like, same with, I'm sure it happened with Crosby, it happened with all those guys, but at some point, like when do they get a break? You see it more and more now, maybe because of the social media and everybody doing more talks, and whether it's Instagram, Twitter, everyone's got a camera out to see where Connor Bedard is. Like I heard the other day when they did I read it on Twitter, somebody was out playing road hockey right in the street. I think the day the NHL did the draft lottery. So like he probably can't even go on the street to play, to do anything without a camera on him. So right. It's got to be pretty tough for him on that part of it.
Another short break from the conversation with head coach and GM of the Everett Silvertips, Mr. Dennis Williams, to remind you that Up My Hockey, there's a lot of other new things happening at Up My Hockey, one of which is going to be the release of the Up My Hockey app. Yes, I am excited to announce that Up My Hockey will have its own app directly on your player's phone or directly on the parent's phone. There is going to be a parent portion and also a player's portion where players can get involved with the Up My Hockey trainings, have access to me, also where you can get involved in the membership programs with Up My Hockey. There's going to be a lot of free content on there. There's going to be also membership version content on there as well. What Up My Hockey is now coming to the pocket of your phone. It's going to be a great way for me to stay in contact not only with my private clients and my group clients and also the graduates of the Peak Potential Project, but also anyone who's just interested in how mindset can help, what it is that I talk about, what it is Up My Hockey believes, and yeah, it'll be a great addition to the Up My Hockey suite of services. So be sure to watch out for that. It's going to be available on Apple at the Apple Store and also on Google at the Play Store. So search. I'm sure we'll make an announcement here. If you're an Up My Hockey follower, you'll see us somewhere talking about the app when it does launch. But if you are bored and listening to this, then go check your Apple Store or your Google Store. Maybe it's available right now and get that on your phone. Super excited about that development, and a bunch of new releases of the Peak Potential Project coming up here in the fall. We're also going to be doing U13 and under programming. I'm going to release my goal and habit tracker to my Up My Hockey community for younger players and for older players. Lots of new content, lots of new developments on the go here. So Up My Hockey is growing, and I couldn't be happier to share it with you. And for most of you, it's because of you. So a lot of you are podcast listeners. A lot of you are also a part of the Up My Hockey parent group. So I thank you for being a part of that. And I'm sure many of you have taken a program from me, or have taken a workshop, or been involved in a spring program, or have done a skills session, or something along the lines that that has been involved with Up My Hockey or been involved with me directly. So I thank you for being a piece of that and being a piece of the growth of what Up My Hockey is. So a lot of the new content that's coming is going to be able to reach a larger market outside of the geographic area, of the Okanagan and Vernon. A lot of it's going to be the mindset course base. It's going to be digital downloads that can help your athlete, videos that can help, and that'll all be on at the Up My Hockey app. So yes, be watching for the release of the app. And now we will get back to the conversation with Dennis Williams. I was going to circle back on what you talked about, because it's funny you mentioned like the effort of a shot, because when my boys, so FYI, my boys, I have 3 boys, all hockey players, all think they want to be hockey players, and are all fairly accomplished in their own right at their own age group right now. But my oldest is stepping into his draft year, so he's an 09. So you guys might be looking at him this year coming up, and so he's a workhorse. He's in the garage all the time. He's trying to get his game better, and he's watching the Instagram feeds like all the other kids. And I showed him this clip that somebody put together on Bedard's goals, and it was around the time of the World Junior, right? And so the video was showing like how he used his hands to shoot. And I said, no, watch something else. I'm like, what do you see here with Connor? And anyways, he ended up getting it to it, but it was the absolute max effort exertion every time he shot the puck. Like, he would legitimately close his eyes. He was shooting it so hard, right? So I was like, look at the effort there, right? Because guys will come in and they'll shoot, but not the way that he shoots, right? Like, he is trying to put the puck through the back of the net, and you can tell by what it's on his face. And it was a really impactful moment for my boy, because he was like, yeah, I don't shoot the puck like that. Like, he went in the garage and he's like, now he's trying to emulate that. Like, how do I shoot the puck max effort? And you don't see guys shoot like that. I mean, so I think that's great that you mentioned that, because I noticed that just from some video clips that this guy is really trying to shoot the puck.
Oh, it is. And like I said, I wouldn't want to be a goalie in warmouts. And we joked about this. So we had our goalies were great, Benny and Thomas Milichin. But remember the first practice we had, and you probably remember this. There's nothing like you do a drill and the guys are coming down to the top of the circles, and just, it's the first practice with the team, and they're just zing, zing, zing. And the poor goalies are like, what is this warm-up drill kind of, and we joked after that, we might want to move it out a little bit, make sure the guys just put some on net. But I just remember watching Connor come down, and it was right in that elbow of the net. And as you said, and you see those still pictures of him with his eyes closed, like how hard, like the ump and the exertion, and like you said, like he doesn't come down and shoot with every shot has a purpose, and he's looking to score, and it's not just throwing a puck to the net, which a lot of kids do. They just, hey, I'm here at the dot. Oh, I got to put it on net. Like if he's putting it on net and he's laying off, it's because he's looking to go off pad, because he's got a double lane driver or something. Like he's got a true scorer's mindset. There's a shooting mentality, which I always say is different from a scorer's mentality here. Yeah. A scorer's mentality will see what his options are, survey what help he has. Does he got an outside lane driving? Is he getting pinched off? And then, and then you got a kid like in a scorer's mindset, like I was just saying it, and like Connor, like he has a lot of our guys, even our level, just put a puck on net without a purpose.
Yep.
Right in the belly, the goalie's belly. Now it's a face-off. We're not looking for second, third opportunities, or we're not shooting to score. I remember my dad always saying that to me: shoot to score, shoot to score. It was every practice as a kid and all the way through. And a kid like Connor Bedard, he shoots to score. Now I know what he means through all that time. Maybe I should have listened more 30 years ago. But it was really, when I watch him, and when you watch not just him, but all of some of these other real elite, prolific goal scorers, like they're not out, like they're there to put that puck in the area that they're looking at. And it's, if any kid can watch, but I also heard, and I don't know this, but the amount of work he puts into a shot, you've probably seen, and lifting the tires in the backyard or in the ground, like it just didn't come. He obviously has some God gifted ability, but I wouldn't say, I also think he's put in the time and effort too, off it. It's just not showing up and not working on it. So yeah, it's something, if anyone can mirror it, they'll have a chance to play pro.
Yeah, I love hearing what you just talked about there too, because I think that there is this misconception, especially amongst like common hockey fans or common hockey players, that like a guy like Connor Bedard or Connor McDavid is just better than everybody else, just from a natural, like fixed mindset kind of persona, right? Like they were born with more skills, and of course these guys were born with more skills. I think they had a higher place to start. But from what I've heard with the guys that end up getting, like in the Crosbys of the world too, like you combine the work ethic, right? Like the world-class elite work ethic with world-class talent. Now you have a generational talent, right? Like the only guy that I think doesn't qualify as that I've known and heard from is like his habits was potentially Mario Lemieux. And that's maybe questionable because he was so hurt all the time that I'm not sure what he could or couldn't do with his back. But, you know, for the most part, these guys, they align their personal habits, they align their training habits with their skill set, and then they become amazing. You know, and I just don't want to discount that. And I'm glad you brought that up because for those listening, like I guarantee you, Connor Bedard has spent more time working on his shot than 99% of the hockey population. And go figure, he has a great shot. You know, like I just think that sometimes that gets overlooked, that these guys are just super good. You know, they're just better. You know, they can't be touched. And these guys generally work really, really hard at their stuff. So one more question about Connor. Do you know what shaft flex he uses?
No, but it's not high, because I'm going to tell you, I used it as my coach's stick because it's a coach's dream stick because you don't have to put much effort into it. And when you're a couple 100 pounds, it goes even faster and harder. So it's I used his stick there. I remember he came up to me, he was like, "Hey, Willie, try this out." And honestly, I'm like, no wonder you score all the time. I joked with him. I go, and so it's not a high flex.
Yeah, I heard it's like 65 or 67 or something like that. Sounds about accurate, I think.
Probably somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But when's the last time you really see him take a slap shot?
Yeah.
You know, I got to try to think, like in the tournament, if he maybe a one-timer on the power play, you know, off it, but you know, you just don't see him. Everything's just that quick release now, right? And the goalies are bigger, you know, they defend harder, so you don't have that time anymore. So, you know, he snaps it. But it's a whip. You can definitely, like I said, from a coach's standpoint, I think I'm going to move to a 65 moving forward. I got to tell my equipment guy, get rid of that 95 big oak tree I'm using.
Yeah, I mean, I bring that up because it's a topic that I talk about, and you know, with my parent group and with the players that I coach, and whoever wants to listen, is like a lot of times these young players, like now I'm talking like U13 kind of players, U15 even, right? Like it's almost like they feel accomplished and graduated, like when they get to move up in a flex, and it's like the vast majority of them can't use it, and they're not using the technology properly. Like, you know, a couple of kids on my team, like I've got 50s for whatever. They might be 110, 120 pounds. They can't use that flex. I mean, they shouldn't even be close to that. So anyways, that's sort of another little battle that I'm fighting. Yeah. Like, you guys have this technology available to you, like use it, use the technology. Don't give yourself, you know, a disadvantage by having something that you can't flex. But anyways, I just wanted to bring that up because I did hear that Connor does have a stick that is much more flexy than others might think. And Brett Hull had the same thing, actually. Brett Hull was a guy that like used a stick that was really whippy, and I think Kessel is too. So some of the best goal scorers in the game have gone by that. I want to talk a little bit about the draft because it just happened, and what that looks like as far as from someone in your shoes. I think you said off air before we started that you do want to come to the BC Cup or the Alberta Cup and have some eyes on some players, but you don't want to get too hands-on because you want to trust the people that are doing the work and have seen them lots. How do you what is your role when it comes to the draft and participating in it?
Well, because I do both jobs, it's a lot harder to get out, and so I rely on 99% on it with Mike Fraser, who's our assistant GM here. We have a really good rapport, really good relationship, really good understanding of how we want to construct our team, what I look for in players. Obviously, the communication side between him and I have to be dialed in off that. And so when we go to the BC Cup or the Alberta Cup per se, he gives me a list. This year we had 2 first-round picks, a second. We had 2 seconds, but we made a trade with one of them, and a third and a fourth. So what I did when I got there was he kind of branched out and gave me a list of guys to focus on for that 2 days instead of, you know, getting this roster of 8 teams and be like, holy smokes, I don't have a clue what's going on, right? And so so I just had to kind of, and even then, like I said to you, I might catch a kid have a real good weekend or a real bad weekend. So we have a book on everybody. And we do we do our checks on character and calls to opposing coaches and not just their coaches and people they know, but we really try to make sure we're finding the all around right athlete and not just the most skilled all the time. And we really live by that here in Everett. And we're true to that. And so really when I go there, it's just kind of just so I had an idea instead of just watching video, often like you were just saying live barn. It's pretty hard sometimes to get a good feel off a live barn watching a kid, and when we get into the mid parts of the draft, I might have seen them at these events as well. But if not, I rely totally on Mike and our staff to make those decisions. And really, I'm there in a support role. I'm there to, have quiet talks with Mike, to just, keep him and, re-encourage him in ideas and not to maybe stray from his initial thought or his initial gut, because he's starting to maybe overanalyze or overthink it, which is easy in the draft. But he puts all the hard work in and time with all our scouts to put a list together prior to, and we rank them, and so at that point, just go with your gut, go with your list, because you put in the time. Don't second guess yourself. It's kind of like an exam. You do a question and then you think, should I change it? 9 times out of 10, if you change it, you're wrong. You probably had it right. So that's what I try to do.
Do you, as far as your pick there, Breck Liskey, I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right. As far as your first pick, I think it was 10. Is that right? 10 or
10. Yeah.
So your 10th in that scenario, is there a philosophy that you guys try and do? Like, is it just strictly the best player you think is available there? Or do you looking at the depth chart in a pick like that and saying, hey, we really need a left shot D or a right shot D or whatever in like the scenario of Liskey? Like, how do you guys go about those picks?
Yeah, it's a great question because that's always the debate. And the one thing I found in this league, it's not so much trying to set up by position. At the number 10 pick, it's like, let's get who we think's the best at that spot. Who we need. And obviously right shot deer always seem to still to stay hard to come by, often. And we have a lot of guys playing their offside, which I think it hinders them a bit. Not so much they can't do it, but our forwards just chuck pucks up to the point under pressure and they're trying to collect on their backhand. It's difficult. So when we talked about Breck, I know that was a guy Mike has liked since day one and has always, been on it with him, been pushing. Hey, if he's there at 10, this is what. But then again, when draft day comes, a lot of stuff can happen. Guys you think that are going to be taking the top 5 might fall to 10. So then you always got to be on your toes and ready to move. And but then we had a second pick in the first round, we wanted to go with a forward. So we had 1-1. So if say Breck was gone, we might have taken a forward in that spot if we felt like that was the best player available, and then probably have taken a D with that second pick. So we knew no matter what in that first round and throughout the rounds right up, we've liked all our draft picks. Again, Mike did an unbelievable job of us being able to get the players we kind of some we didn't think would be there. We had them pegged higher. So to us, that's a win in our eyes. And every GM and every staff has different values and views on players, right? So there's a lot of them that we had higher that were still up there and we were super excited to get. So we really look forward to it. Like it's nice that we've been able to get some picks this year because of the trade. Next year, the year after, we have our 07s, a bunch of them signed right now. So we're going to be able to start to assimilate and get them surrounded by other great hockey players instead of always having to trade picks or go out and find bodies. So we're really big on developing from within and having these players want to commit to the league and commit to Everett, allows us to work with them for the next 4 or 5 years.
Awesome. I have one just curiosity question, and for those listening, that there was 2 brothers available in the draft, the Ruck brothers, and so people outside of the WHL that listen, really accomplished twins from the CSSHL. They played at OHA. I think they were 1 and 2 in the league in points at the end of the year, and both great players of their own right. I did hear, and this is just hearsay, because I never heard it from them specifically, but that they would only go to the WHL if they were on the same team, if they got drafted to the same team. Most draft boards had them kind of both in the top 10 potentially. You know, it depends where you're looking at. I know everyone has a different feel for that. One of them went in the top 10, 8, and the other guy didn't go to like 20 something, and they did both go to the same team. So to me, it seemed like there had to be something amongst the GMs that was happening there, or like how did Medicine Hat able to get both those two players without seeming to have to like trade up as high as I thought maybe somebody would have to do that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. No, I didn't speak to anybody. I know we had our board, and the one went right before us, and that allowed us to get Breck, off it. And to be quite honest, we just turned our focus to what we thought the next 10 would lay out, because we picked 20 again. Yeah. So we for us, and it probably is a natural tendency to think that if you have twins, they'd probably want to play together, or brothers. You had the Sedins, go to Vancouver together. Now they trade up, off that, off it. But at the end of the day, not knowing the whole inside out, it probably, like for us, our focus right away was we have a scenario where we want to have a good feeling of who wants to come to Everett, who wants to play in the Western Hockey League. So the risk reward for us, we wanted to make sure we got 2 players in the first round that after their questionnaires and discussions wanted to be in Everett Silvertip and play here. And so that's where we just put our focus at. So I got to watch them both play at the BC Cup. I guess this is the first time they didn't play together. And they're, like you said, they're unbelievable players. Medicine Hat got 2 great ones there. So, they obviously got a bright future there with Willie Desjardins and Medicine Hat.
Well, yeah, and then they got, why am I drawing a blank on the first overall picks there? Gavin McKenna. Gavin McKenna's coming up there.
Gavin.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, they got some good ones there. And I guess, to your point, that'd be the other thing. I think it would be a little bit of a risk for a GM maybe to take the other one, because then now somebody either has to trade if what they're saying is true, that they wouldn't go together. So maybe it was just a natural instinct not to step in and risk that, right? If you knew that someone was going to be coming and that wanted to come to your organization, you'd probably want to be a little more sure of that, I guess, at that stage, especially when you're dealing with the first round selection. I wanted to chat. I did a little bit of homework. One, I have my youngest is a 2012, and he's born November 29th. He happens to be quite good, for his age, and he's doing great with that birth date. But obviously, it's something that can sometimes hinder people. And with the WHL draft being 14, I was like, well, what kind of impact does this have? I was just kind of curious about it. So I looked up every single kid that was drafted this year. And when their birth date was. So I broke it up into quarters, right? Like January to March, the 4 quarters. So there's 217 kids, I think, that gave their draft date or their birth date. Some of them I couldn't find on Elite Prospects. Just a random guess. How many do you think were drafted from the 4th quarter of the year? How many players out of the 200?
Yeah, this is good. So I'm actually writing this down because I want to know this. I would say, so as the youngest.
Yeah, the last group. Yes, the youngest. So born in October, November, December.
25.
21. So close, super close. So, which was crazy to me because I think, what is it, 50? You would kind of think, right? Like theoretically, it should be roughly 25, 25, 25, 25, right? Like percent. The 2 middle quarters had 25%. And it was weighted, like what was taken off of the quarter of the last group was put on to the January, February, March baby. So there's like 43% of the draft, I think, or something like that was taken from January, February, or March. Now, my next experiment I want to do, and I haven't had a chance yet, was to see that at WHL draft that went a little bit later, because of the bubble year, to see if that would swing it a little bit. That would it would allow some of these players to get a little older, a little bigger. My point being, I guess, is I'm curious because maturity, physical maturity is such a massive impact at that age, right? 14, have kids growing? Have they not? Are they even in the league where they're being drafted? Like those types of things. Is that something that comes across to the coffee room table there about like how old the kid actually is when you're talking about him?
I look at it because then he's a late draft for the NHL,
right?
As well. If he's behind, right?
Get an extra year if he's a real good one, right?
Yeah, so if he can make it at that age, he really gets the 3 years in our league before he goes into his first go around of being drafted. So it benefits, on that side of it too, off it. But they're so young to like when like we have players in our team like Olin Zellweger. Like I said, when he came in here, I remember like when he left, turning to a GM at the time, like this kid's playing here. Like he'd come to my office, I'm like, really? Like we're signing him? He's this tall and he's got. And meanwhile, now he's arguably one of the best defensemen across, junior hockey, right off it. So it's so hard to just pigeonhole players at this draft based off of size. We've drafted Ben Hemmerling, who's 5'0", Austin Roos 5'0", and they're both going to be. One's already drafted by Vegas. One's going to be probably drafted this year in Austin Roos, and unbelievable years. But that's the tricky part with the draft is trying to project. And I give all the credit to scouts, and because it's not easy. Even me going to that BC Cup, an Alberta Cup, I'm like, oh, this job can't be fun. I'm thinking in my head, like, to sit there and try to project 3 years out, because some of these kids, they're 100 pounds.
Yeah.
They're 105 pounds and they're 5 feet nothing. But, the skill level, we took a kid last year, Julian Mays. And if I don't know what he is, 135 pounds maybe. And he played this year for us. But the skill, the hands, the creativity, the compete, we'll work with that all day long. As I always say, and the size, I will come, like I'm not worried and with it, but it's definitely the ages is one too, because it doesn't surprise me when you brought that up, because it's easier for like, that's a big gap. So say your boy's born in November and you got a February, like that's a lot of maturing there on a player, off it, where it's easy to really separate yourself if you're that much stronger and faster at that age, so
Right.
it takes a lot more, I think, talent from a scouting standpoint to really dive into a player and see, what is their true skill set, what's their true ability, and being able to separate it from the other player over here who's 10 months older.
Right.
Because
I think that is,
makes it tough.
like to me, because it's easy to fall in love with the Verhoffs and the Liskis, right? They're big, strong kids at that age, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously you're trying to evaluate their skill set, but they have a physical advantage over everyone, right? That will end up not being there at some point, right? Like everyone's going to be big, everyone's going to be strong at some point. So it's hard to separate those two for sure. But to your point, right? I mean, like the birthday I just brought up, like my youngest TJ, I mean, if you were to freeze the clock now and allow him that 11 months that January guy has, and now let's go back on the same ice, you know what I mean? Like it's a different
That's
story.
a great point.
Yeah. It's a different story. So, I mean, obviously it's part of the game, I guess. It's probably part of the formula, but I did find it interesting that only 21 kids were there. And then I think probably to back up on that, I think there's probably less players available to draft that are that age anyways. Like I think probably like that pool is smaller because they're not at the AAA level, or they're not at the, the CSSHL prep level. So I guess it's probably reflective of how many people are actually there, but it is sort of crazy that how big of an impact, especially in athletics, that your birthday can have on being at the party or not.
Oh, it's huge. And I find it like, even I have my daughter, she's a 2012 and she plays with boys, but like, as we all know, girls develop faster.
Yeah.
And my wife and I we're not monsters, let me tell you, height wise. Like my wife's like 5 feet and I'm 5'9", 5'8". I'm probably lying at 5'9". I'm still trying to work on my hockey card, probably height and weight there. But one of the things it's like, I see her out there, and we were in a tournament this weekend with all girls, all the way down to 2014. We're up at the Canlin, up at the Cami Granado had a showcase up there, so we were up there for that, her and I, and I'm watching like the to be honest, the most skilled players were the young ones, and they just couldn't get to the inside or play. And my daughter wouldn't be one of the most skilled, but she's one of the stronger ones right now because, much like you said here, she's older and has the size advantage and strength advantage. But I do think at some point, that's where at our level, I think players adjust differently, and you said it best. At some point, everyone's going to be the same strength or the same size. At some point, you're going to, that separation's going to close, off on guys. And it's the ones that have that mindset, as you alluded to, a Connor Bedard or an Olin Zellweger here. Like Olin Zellweger, he was the last guy to leave every single day. And like you said, like, I mean, I had D-men coming in wanting more ice time. And I'd ask them straight up, Jason, I'd be like, are you the hardest worker? No, Zellweger is. Like, how can you tell your coach that? And you're coming in for more ice time, but yeah, you're just telling me the other defenseman's the hardest worker, who's getting that. Like, and so to me, and I think for a guy like, say, Olin, he's a smaller defenseman. He's always had that chip on his shoulder, right? Like, kind of, I'm going to keep proving people wrong. Like, people say I'm 5'10", 5'11", whatever he is. Is he too small to play in the NHL? He's too small to play in the Western Hockey League. And, you just see these guys grind out. So for us here, size has never been an issue. Age has never been an issue, often. Because I think Julian Mays is a late birthday for us, too. Yeah. We took him first round last year. I think he's a later one, November, because he played as a 14-year-old for us last year at the beginning of the year.
Right, like Gavin McKenna. That was crazy when I saw how old he was. I mean, I'm really about the personal development too. Like, I love connecting the person to the hockey player, and like you said, like that's what Everett's all about. It sounds like that's a big piece of how you guys recruit too. But I think it's really interesting from the ecosystem and the environment that they're in, right? Generally speaking, and you're speaking to it now with Olin. So he was smaller, right? Later to develop. He was forced in some ways to do what he did, right? Like, he had to compete. He had to be a hard worker. He had to be last off the ice. Whereas some of these guys that are January, February, the king of the roost, they've been the dog the whole time. They don't have to work as hard as these other guys. They might not arrive with the habits required to really keep making those next steps, So I like seeing that too, right? Or challenging the players that I work with. Some of these guys that are bigger, right, that have it a little bit easier. They think they're working hard, but there's definitely more room for them to go, right? Like, they're not working like they could because they don't have to. I find that I can relate to that too myself, because I was an early developer and I was a hard worker, but there's more I could have done. There was somebody that was smaller than me that was trying to catch me, that was doing more, right? So I like using those experiences too, and challenging guys to like keep raising their personal standards, because something as simple as a birth date and your size can be reflective of how you operate.
Oh, 100%. And all players, and I always say this to players coming to our team, like, everyone has a different path. Everyone develop, like, and I always try not to compare yourself to the other guy next to you. Like, sure, you want his ice time, but don't compare yourself to him. Just you're comparing yourself to get his ice time, because we had a kid named Ronan Sealy who was on the ice for the Golden Goal in the summer event. 7th round pick to Carolina, and made the World Junior team, which doesn't happen too much to get a 7th round, and on the ice in overtime. When we end up scoring there, Kent Johnson, when we had the summer one. His first year here as a D-man, he was a 1st round pick. He probably played 15 games as a forward. 20 games as a forward. We had an older D-core, 19, 20, like real old and big. And he was a 1st round pick. And, you're trying to balance him in, but you can't. It was hard to sit a veteran who'd been here 3 years, 4 years, that it's played good hockey. Like, we only lost 15 games maybe that year. Like, there wasn't any really warrant, but I had to get him in. And so I always think back to a kid like him who's now playing in the American League. He signed with Carolina. But he could have easily went down the other path, asked for a trade. I'm sure there's times he did feel sorry for himself and, just needed, but he went through a rough patch there that has only made him a better player and a better person. Like, it wasn't just all this way up. Like, he was kind of here. He played his youth hockey in Lethbridge. They had a really good team with Ridley Gregg, and Mike Dick was their coach, and these guys, and Carson Dick. And then he came here, and he was down in this somewhere, trying to refine himself and tweak. But I look back on it and I said, I think, and he was a co-captain, but those trials and tribulations he went through will only help him, because now when he's in the American League, like, he appreciates what he's at, where he's at, what he's done, because he's put in the work and he's grinded it. And so if he gets a bump down up there, he knows how to handle it, and so I think those guys, and it's no secret that he's playing in the American League and will have a chance to play in the NHL because of his mindset, how he approached it. But that's tough for a kid to go from D and now you're playing 4th line forward. Thinking, I played 15 years. You drafted me as a 1st rounder, but we as coaches don't always make the right moves or decisions, I guess, either. But he was, I give that a player a lot of credit. So anybody that's listening, in terms of parents that, are listening about their kids, like, here's a guy that surely, be known he's in the American League, signed in the NHL, and it didn't go this way. Gage Gonsalves, we listed him. He came to our team year one, had 1 goal. Okay, so 1 goal as a forward. Next year he had like 35 and drafted second round to Tampa. Never drafted in the Western Hockey League. Scored 1. How do you only score 1 goal playing 65 games?
Right.
I said the only reason was poor coaching. I said I didn't put him in the right spots. And then the next year he scores 30 something, 39 or 38, and he's playing in Syracuse in his second or third year, second round pick to Tampa. But like everyone's path's different, and what's cool about it is whether you get drafted in the Western Hockey League or not, it doesn't define you from reaching your ultimate goals. And Ryan Hofer is never drafted. He signed Washington. Like we have so many stories on that path as well.
Yeah, I was gonna. Well, actually, when you were talking about that, I'm probably going to tell you something. Maybe you don't know, and you can use it if you ever have to put somebody as a forward to defenseman again. So when I interviewed Wendell Clark, who actually happened to be a line mate of mine for my cup of coffee with the Leafs, came on and was a guest on the podcast. And so he told me a story that he was first overall, the NHL draft, first overall. Mm-hmm. He was a defenseman in junior hockey. He showed up at Toronto Maple Leafs camp, Dennis. Toronto Maple Leafs camp, and he walked in and they had the roster posted on the door and they had him as a left winger. That's how he got told, like the first overall pick, that he was going to be a forward. Can you believe that? Like that blew my mind. And obviously maybe they got it right because he was obviously a hell of a player, but like as far as the communication back in the day and like, whatever, respect, whatever you want to call it, like that's how we found out that he was going to be a forward as the best 18-year-old in the world at the time.
Could you imagine just seeing a green jersey with 2 other guys out there? Like, what's going on here? And, it's funny how that works. And it's not ideal, but obviously someone saw, like you said, something right in him then, because obviously the career he had was unreal how he played
approach, right? I mean, that's the thing that I think what's so amazing about that is because that could have maybe dismantled him. It could have maybe crushed him if it was somebody else. But like just his workman-like mentality, I think probably his upbringing up in the farm, like, okay, this is something I'm just going to figure out and I'm going to go do, right? Like a forward approach.
Yeah.
Like those little subtle choices that players have in those moments, like the kid you talked about, like he had a choice there. He could have sulked, he could have pouted, he could have not put in his best effort. And maybe could have had every right to feel that he should have felt that way, right? Like all the things would say, this isn't fair, right? Wendell Clark had that same choice, but he made a different choice as the player you talked about there, and they come out the other side better for it. And I just love those little micro moments, right, in players' careers where they have a choice, they can go one way or the other, and
right.
And if you try and keep your goals and dreams aligned with where you're at. One matters more than the other. Let's put it that way.
Well, right? It does. And it's not straight. I look at my coaching path. Like I was an interim head coach at Bowling Green as a younger guy, and I didn't get the full-time position. They opened it up at the time. And I remember sitting there with my wife, and we just had our first daughter, Emerson. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Like I remember sitting there feeling sorry for myself. And I had an old coach I worked for named Danton Cole. I know if you ever played against Danton in your time, and he was a coach at Alabama Huntsville. I was an assistant with him, and he told me something once that he goes, "You're never a coach till you've been fired. You're never a player till you've been traded." Kind of. And I was young at the time, 29, 30, and I took a job in the North American League in Amarillo, Texas, and I was like, "What am I doing? This is the only job I can find. I'm a Canadian, and I got to go to Amarillo, Texas, in the Panhandle to coach a Tier 2 junior team." But I did it. 4 years I coached there, loved it. Like unbelievable experience. That's the type of job you do everything. Skate sharpening, laundry, like you're wearing all the hats. If you could drive a Zamboni, you're probably forced to do that right often. But I think everything has a reason. So I took that job. The owner bought a USHL team, Bloomington, and he moved me there to start his team from scratch. My owner owns the Everett Silvertips. So I took a job in the North American League, who owned the USHL team and owns where I am today. So I've worked 16 years for our owner, Bill Ewell. And if I didn't take that path to the North American League, if I thought my ego was too big, my pride, all that, but I took a job in the North American League Tier 2 in Amarillo, Texas, being from outside of Toronto, Stratford, thinking I can't get a job. But it was the best decision I made because that has given me the opportunity now to coach a USHL team, to coach in the Western Hockey League, to be involved with Hockey Canada, to coach the World Juniors. and to develop some of the best players, coming out of the game right now. Like everything happens for a reason, but it's how you take it. I could have sat there and felt sorry for myself and had all the phone calls and, oh, you should have been the head coach, or you're not getting the fair shake, whatever. But I wanted to coach, and I didn't want to take a year off. I was going to be paid, but I wanted to coach. So I took a job, and lo and behold, I met our owner who owns a state, and it's been 16 years for him.
Wow, what a great story. I did read up a little bit on that, but I didn't know the owner part, because I saw like your route, right? Like NAHL, USHL, WHL. And I saw your success at the NAHL level with your championships there. So, and generally speaking, when I've interviewed coaches like Jared Bednar or Brad Larson, like these guys usually win like at East Coast League. Like there's usually some type of success. They go to the AHL, there's usually some type of success, and then, they graduate to the head job. So I saw that you had success there, but then I was wondering, because the USHL didn't look like it was super successful as far as from a playoff standpoint was concerned. And then I was actually going to ask you about that, like the graduation. I guess it would be a step up, right, to the WHL from the USHL. Major junior would be deemed a higher level job, although there's nothing wrong with the USHL at all. But being a part of that ownership group and a part of that ecosystem, and they knew who you were and what you were about and what you offered, it kind of, I guess you were able to maybe not have to win a championship in order to get a promotion,
Yeah, tough. The USHL is a tough league. It's an older league. Your third, fourth liners are kind of guys waiting to go to college, right? So they've maybe been pushed back or anything along those lines. But really, our second year, the USHL, I always say, I don't know if it's still the same. So I'll only talk when I was there, because I haven't followed up what they do for playoffs. But we're a league that only had like 40% of the teams make the playoffs. And as coaches, you keep your job by making playoffs. So normally it's the other way around. 2 teams don't make it, and everybody gets a playoff, right? I remember sitting in a meeting going, this doesn't make sense to me. So we started that team from scratch, and we finished over 500. The second year we lost in the Eastern Conference Finals to Dubuque, I think it was, in 5 games. We upset at number 1, but everything's a best of 5. But I remember saying only 4 teams out of 9 in our conference made it. Wow. And I'm like that, I've never seen that in any league. Normally they want, playoff games because of gates or revenue or anything, like prolong as much as you can. I said, aren't we doing? And most of us are coach GMs at that level because of just the way the structure is of those organizations. So I remember being in a GM meeting, like we're not helping ourselves here, guys. Like we should vote to go a little bit further. But yeah, so we did that, and then the next year, lots of turnover in that league. But it was a tough adjustment in the fact that we started from scratch, and they didn't give us quite the startup as what Jimmy Montgomery got in Dubuque. So he started Dubuque a few years earlier, and they won it all the first year. And we were given X amount of cards, tenders, or you're allowed to go sign kids. Well, I think, and don't quote me, but I think they got like 10. They lowered us to 5. We got the first pick after the non-playoff teams, where they got the first pick in the expansion draft, and they had it was a layup, but it happened too fast, too quick, right? So then we came in, and so you had to move one of these cards for 2 or 3 players. So it was interesting because it totally different leagues, totally different mindsets on the way teams play, and maybe because the Western or the Canadian Hockey League has more discrepancy in age, and you really develop from within. But that was a league in the USHL where I could go draft a kid from Vernon or the kid from Salmon Arm or Alberta, Ontario, and bring in a 19-year-old and put them on your third, fourth line. Where here we develop those players. Right. So we're a lot younger. So from a coaching standpoint, though, you have to be on your game here, because when are you going to put out that young line? Sometimes I can tell you another team's throwing out, their top dogs right there, and you're like, oh, we better get this puck out. So it's, but that's how those players learn too, though.
Take another short break from the conversation with Dennis Williams just to go on a little bit of rant about the Memorial Cup. The Memorial Cup is the Stanley Cup of the CHL playoffs. So for my American listeners who are unfamiliar with what the Memorial Cup is, that is when the champion of the WHL, the champion of the OHL, and the champion of the QMJHL, which is the Western Hockey League, the Ontario Hockey League, and the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, the 3 champions participate in a week-long tournament along with the host city. to be crowned Memorial Cup champion. So hard enough to become the champion of your own league. All these teams go through a traditional 4-round playoff format where they have to win 16 games to become champion of their own league. But then they go to, someplace for the Quebec team, the Quebec Ramparts. They came clear across the country to Kamloops, BC, to play against the other champions and to be crowned the best of 60 major junior teams. And we were fortunate enough to go to a game. The Kamloops Blazers alumni were gracious enough to allow me and my boys into their box. I believe that was sponsored by Acres, so thank you for Acres, the owner of Acres there, that opened the door to the Blazers, and the Blazers who in turn opened the door to me and my boys. An ex-Spokane Chief was allowed inside the inner circle there, so hope I didn't out you guys, but it was a pleasure to have you. I saw some old faces in there. Rob Branch was there, and Nat Dominic Kelly was in there, and Steve Passmore was there, and geez, I'm forgetting the name of somebody. But anyways, it was funny. The guys that were there were directly from my era, so it was great to shake hands with those boys. We had a lot of great battles back in the 90s, and to watch some WHL action. So I actually watched Seattle. We watched Seattle and Quebec, and Seattle, by all accounts, was supposed to be one of the best teams in a long time that the WHL had produced, and the WHL has been on a long winless streak at the Memorial Cup, which actually surprised me. I wasn't aware of the history there, but it's been over 10 years that WHL has won a Memorial Cup. Sounded like, kind of on home turf in Kamloops. The Kamloops Blazers had a heck of a hockey team too, that the WHL would likely be champions this year, and Quebec had different things to say about it, and by all accounts, they were the best team at the tournament. I think the best team won, especially given what happened in that final. I thought that Seattle was maybe better in the round robin. I thought that Quebec got a couple good bounces, a couple fortunate breaks, and were able to lock down on defense and got really great goaltending. And I thought, Seattle outshot them quite dramatically that game. And I thought, hey, if they're going to play again, I think Seattle might come out triumphant here. But Quebec just played some excellent hockey. Coach Patrick Waugh there had those guys playing some really, really strong defense. I thought their defensive awareness was one of the strongest I'd seen at the junior level, and even at pro, to be honest. The way the NHL players play in this day and age, there isn't a whack of attention on defense. But I thought that the Ramparts were fantastic in their own end. I thought the structure they played with was great, but they were also a really skilled team that caused Seattle to break down, caused some 2-on-1, some turnovers, and it was in the back of the net. I mean, they were able to finish. So really polished unit there. They had a fantastic season in the queue. They were the best team there all year, and were able to win their league and came over here and showed us what it's all about. So congratulations to Quebec. Unfortunate for Seattle and Kamloops to come out empty-handed again. Obviously, my loyalty lies with the West, being a former Western Leaguer myself. I like to see those teams do well, but you got to give credit where credit's due, and that Quebec team was playing some really, really good hockey. So, just my take on the Memorial Cup. I'm not sure where it is next year, but WHL is kind of a little more prevalent in my house right now because my oldest Hudson feels that he would love to get drafted this year and would want to follow in Dad's footsteps and play some WHL games himself. So we've been watching the WHL a little more closely. So I just thought we'd share that experience, and would love to hear what you guys think if you're out west about the WHL route or going the BCHL route. As many of you know, I'm the mental performance coach with the Salmon Arm Silverbacks of the BCHL. I've been fortunate to work with them for the last couple of years, and I also played in the BCHL as a player back when I was 15. So I've experience with both leagues. Different routes. One takes you to college if you're successful enough and able to do that and obtain a scholarship. And the other one is more of a direct pro route, as you have to, when you leave major junior, if you can play pro at 20, then you're able to go and earn a living doing it. And if you can't play pro, then you're able to take your scholarship money and go play for a Canadian university. So both routes, it's just an interesting choice that players out west have to make. Would love to hear what your thoughts are in the notes below about what you feel about those, and if they should be changing the age or allowing players to still play D1 even though they played WHL. I'm not really sure why that has never happened. It seems to me a little bit odd that a 16-year-old hockey player who plays a game in the WHL is now not eligible to be an NCAA player. And I'm not sure why it is, because maybe that 16-year-old plays in a league that pays them the $60 every 2 weeks, which seems a little bit ridiculous. But neither here nor there. Would love to hear your thoughts, though. And congratulations again to Patrick Waugh and the Quebec Ramparts for their Memorial Cup championship. Now let's get back to the interview with Dennis. As far as like what's next on Dennis Williams' hit list, I mean, you've definitely you're an accomplished major junior coach by any standard. You're now a world junior gold medalist 2 times, one with in the head job. Do you have the aspirations of being a pro coach, whether the AHL or NHL? Is that where you want to go? Or I mean, and I ask that honestly because not everybody does, right? Some people are really happy with where they're at and they like where their family's at. I just was curious if there's something that you wanted to have a next stop at some point.
Well, definitely when I made the decision to come to Everett, all my friends are college guys, so they always joked I came to the dark side. When they came out here from the college to major junior path, right? And so when I came here, my decision was because I wanted to be an NHL coach. I wanted to coach in the NHL. I never played in the NHL, and so that was always your dream as a kid growing up, is you wanted to be in the National Hockey League. And since I've been here, obviously that still continues to be a goal of mine, is I want to coach in the National Hockey League. In terms of timing or path, that's always going to be determined, and the one thing I can say is I'm really fortunate with our organization, what we have here in Everett. My family loves it out here. We love the hockey. We have great fan base, great support from ownership, from everything all around. So, if an opportunity ever presented itself, absolutely, that's something, I think we all like why I came here. But at the same time, I know what I have here is I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky to have a spot that I have, and great support. Like I said, my family is the number one priority to me. So whatever ever happens, it's a family decision, off it. And I wherever the next job takes me, whether I'm here or move on or get fired, as you know, in this job, it's always going to be a family decision. And as we're getting my girls at 14 and 10, it's not as easy just to pick up and ship them all around. So, but again, ultimately, I'd love to coach sometime in the National Hockey League, and I'll keep striving to try to put myself in that, situation.
Generally speaking, and I mean, like you said, every path is different for a coach and for a player as well. Like usually that next stop would be the AHL. You mean, for somebody who's doing really well in the WHL, they would go to the AHL. And sometimes I've seen guys go in the assistant coach role, like they'll step into that from a head coaching job, or they'll go to the head spot. Is that I guess that would be the decision, right? If that job was there and that opportunity, sights are set on a head coaching job, I would assume, like would an assistant coach be something you'd be interested in, or does it depend on the opportunity when it arrives?
Yeah, I think a lot of it be on the opportunity, off it. And as you said, when it all kind of shakes down, and again, I still have priority and onus to this organization here always, and timing's never perfect, as we know, in this job too. And but at the same time, I would never say no to anything, without hearing anything first and kind of seeing if it's always the right fit. And to me, the fit's always the most important part. It's like it's funny. I don't look at it as a job. I haven't had, and it's nothing but since our season's done, I flipped over to GM mode. Like I haven't had, any time really off, and I enjoy that, and I know we as coaches, we need time to separate and get recharged. But to me, it's all about working with the right people. And like I said, that with Hockey Canada, it's been an awesome opportunity and experience working here in Everett around Zorn Ratchik, our president, our owner, Bill Ewell, our coaching staff, Mike Fraser, all our scouts. Like, I love working with those guys. And I think that's really important, that when I wake up in the morning, it's not, I can't wait to get in. I remember my wife said to me, we got done a season quick, and Louis Mass and I played 4 years of college together. He's in San Jose, like I said, and we get done and we're going for coffee the next day. She's like, what are you guys going for coffee for? Like, you just spent the last 90 days together. Right. And I'm like, well, it's Lou, we're just going to talk some NHL playoffs and figure out what we want to work on. She goes like, you literally just got done exit interviews and now you're going to spend 3 hours at Starbucks with them. But like, that's when you got a good staff. Like, it's not work, and that's really what I strive to do. So to me, it's always about surrounding yourself with not always like the best people, but the right people and the right fit.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Maybe we'll just end. We're at 90 minutes now. I wanted to ask you about the WHL draft and the age, and we touched on that a little bit earlier. But the WHL, for people listening that aren't aware, is the only league that drafts 14-year-olds. Most the OHL and the Q draft 15-year-olds, so they can get drafted like in that spring and then show up and be eligible to play major junior hockey. So kind of a two-part question. One is why? And then two, when they had the bubble year and then we had that like the 2 drafts in 1 year, God, I thought that was just the absolute perfect opportunity to just like revert it, right? To catch up with the other leagues and just let those guys have a full season and let the scouts have a full year to watch them. Why? Yeah. So why 14 and why maybe wasn't that opportunity taken advantage of? I know that you're in the meetings there and the GMs voted on that. What's the inside scoop on that story?
Yeah. I think a lot of it just has the way it's been. The earlier colleges are now getting involved with their probably investment in players and recruiting, and they're getting younger and younger there too, as I'm sure you're well aware. So I think really, at that time during the bubble, I wasn't the GM yet, so it was Gary Davidson, off it, and I'm indifferent. Like it's hard to draft Bantams. It's like you and I, we just talked about it, like what you're saying about the date of birth and age and height and all that. And to get another year, like a player can really, have their stock grow, or maybe they're at their peak because they're physically developed and you've seen them at their height, so another year of maturing and evaluation would obviously, I think, sometimes give a better idea of each player at that time. But I'm not sure, the league, it's a little bit above my level in that sense. And I obviously have my opinions on it, throughout it. And I like the idea of having more of the OHL style off it, because it does give you that time. During the COVID year, I wasn't as a GM at that time, but I remember how hard our scouts had to work doing two birth years that year, and with limited hockey, as well, right? So that made it tough, right? So I do think at the end of the day, it'll be something that is always brought up, but as you said, in the case of your boy having a late birthday, that's where I think you see a lot of kids, if they get drafted, in this case, your son sounds like he's a heck of a player, but you also see a lot of kids not and get listed and really turn out to be really good hockey players, because everyone's like, man, how come we didn't see that? Well, because he's a December birthday and he was 100 pounds. And a year later, he's 140 and he's 3 inches taller, So that's the toughness. But yeah, I'm not sure what they'll do with that. But I give a lot of credit to these scouts, man. I don't know if I could go sit in a rink like that all day, and it takes a lot. It takes a special person who understands that age group, who is committed to the time. And as you know, a lot of the scouts, and majority of them, it's not their full-time job in this league. So we depend on a lot of people to help keep this program running by almost a volunteer position for a lot of them, in the sense that they get stipends, but it's not enough where they can quit their jobs, and so they do 2 jobs for us. So we're fortunate to have really good scouts with good eyes.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I assumed it was something to do as far as like leaving the age, like with like the competition for players, really, right? With the U.S. colleges, and I guess you kind of have your foot in both pools, Eric, with your history with the university aspect and how they recruit there. But the part that I just didn't really understand is like the West is the most farthest removed from that system. I mean, there's definitely Western players that go play D1, but all the schools are out East, right? So like the whole ecosystem is a little bit different, right? Whereas I thought the OHL players are more connected to that. They've been able to manage that scenario there, with the OHL and the Q. And I just thought, boy, they would end up going to a 15-year-old draft at some point, but they never did. The other thing I'm curious about is from that draft, like the bubble year, is how many are going to end up playing, because it's roughly about 30%. I think of the league is undrafted players, from what I've understood. I just wonder from that year if there's a higher success rate or a lower success rate, because yes, you saw them kind of play less because of the bubble, but then you also had the ability to see them a little bit older as well. So I think that'd be a cool one to unpack.
Yeah, it'd be something good to look into. You're right off that,
Yeah.
and see where they've fit, from that point.
Yeah.
It was really sad, during that season for a lot of those players, across all sports with what happened to COVID, especially when you're dealing with drafts, throughout it, because there's a lot that put a lot of time and effort in, and I felt sick to my stomach that it was just a halt for them, and it was an important part of their development years for them, off it. And but it's definitely it's a league that we're not perfect in the draft. I always say, like, that's what makes it so interesting. I always like going back from 4 or 5 years to see and it's easy to do that on elite prospects or wherever, and just go to the draft and see who's done what, off it. And and again, we here no different. We've had, first rounders that haven't reported. We have first rounders that have been fourth liners and have been top players, and we've had undrafted guys be our go-to guys. Like you really don't know for about 18 to 24 months of where these players are going to be after we've drafted them. And so it's always a fun part. But the biggest part for us too is trying to get everybody in here quickly so they can see whatever it's all about. Get them assimilated, get them on the ice for practice, meet our guys, and get that comfort level. Because as soon as a kid can start to get the nerves off and realize that, hey, we're no different. We're just a bigger magnitude, no different than when our kids go from here to the American League or the NHL. I talked to a lot of those guys and the NHL coaches and again, you can tell me, they told me it's the same verbiage, just that those guys make $10 million. You're telling the same players, but you're telling your guys the only difference is ours don't get anything and those guys get 10 million. He goes, but you're still preaching no different, from it. So it's and that's what we want to try to get from our guys coming to this league, that it's a jump, but a lot of it's the exact same.
Yeah, definitely an exact science, the draft, for sure. And then even how the guys, I mean, and people put so much emphasis on it. I mean, I'm now in hockey dad hat mode, right? Like my kid's coming up into a draft year. I don't personally put as much emphasis as my son does. Because I know and I understand, right, that, whether you're a 7th rounder or a 1st rounder, don't get drafted. That doesn't mean whether you're going to be a pro or not at all, but it's very, very important to them, right? It's important to them, and they want to be in the right spot, and they're working hard to get recognized. So you want to support that as a dad. And I do. I just, it's crazy to me. Some of, I shouldn't say it's crazy, but there's a lot of decisions that get made around the draft. And for me, that's kind of part of the bit of the heartbreak for me, like with it being young, kids are leaving home for this, kids are, leaving their families to be on the right team so they get the right exposure. And, I'm a massive fan of our sport, and it's given me everything that we have, but it's just like when like family's still family, right? And it's kind of hard when things get done because of this draft, when really it's just one moment in time. And that's what I tell my guys, right? Like, it's one moment in time. It's a snapshot of one thing at one point, and the next day, guess what? Wake up and get better. That's really all it is.
And it's over.
Yeah.
It's a one-day thing. Yeah. Like I remember even talking to Roden Steely, the defenseman. We moved to forward a bit, right? And he was frustrated. He went the 7th round, and I said, it lasts one day. Next day, like, all the tweets are done, Instagram's over, they've all moved on to development camp. You know what I mean? Like, it's all it's a one day, and I the one thing I'm glad we've done with the draft is gone virtual, in the sense of, I remember, and probably yourself, when I was in Ontario, was my one underage draft might have been in Toronto, and my other one was in Kitchener, where you used to put your suit on, like an NHL draft, and you'd go sit there, and some kids would not get drafted, and you're in the 12th, 13th, 14th round. And I remember when I was there, I was with a bunch of our teammates, and I had on a golf shirt because I opted out at the time. I wouldn't report. I was committed to Bowling Green at the time. And the suit took me ahead of some of my teammates that had suits on wanting to get drafted. And I had on like flip-flops. Right. And I went down and got my jersey, the Sioux jersey. And I'm like, what is going on right now? And I was just laughing, but I just remember saying like it's like the NHL draft when that final pick's done, you see so many of those kids leaving,
Yeah.
you know, and again, I would never want my kid to probably go to the draft unless we knew he was going to be a top couple rounder for sure, like otherwise, you hear more and more of them saying stay home. So, but to me, the draft lasts one day and then everything's done. You're back to the normal world the next day. So that's why I always tell guys like and it really define you, so
Yeah.
and I know that's easier said than done.
It sure is. And I think that there is, well, you know what, I'll just ask you. I mean, because I know at the NHL level, and I would assume at the WHL level too, that there is priorities, maybe the wrong, I don't know what the right word is, but like when everyone arrives at camp, like, who your first rounder is, and there's expectations around that. And generally speaking, I would speculate that there's maybe some more opportunities given in that scenario. Like, yes, we want to have an even playing field, and yes, we want to have, all things be equal and best player wins. But if there is anything I would say that the draft does is it gives you maybe a bit more leash for a bit longer the higher you go. Would you agree with that, or is that off?
Yeah, like I think comes greater expectation for that player too. Like can either be really satisfied or dissatisfied from my view at the end of a game versus a player that's maybe has a better opportunity to make a more positive impression because the expectation may not be quite there on that player. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like
totally
where
does. Totally does.
So that first rounder coming in and that second rounder, I'm going to have my book and pen, watching camp going, okay, here's Brett Liskey. So I'm going to be watching him like a hawk. You know what I mean? Like, off it just to make sure where another player, might be able to get away with a few, little less, expectation in that sense. So, but there is like, because you are invested in them, at that pick, just like in the National Hockey League, like you obviously saw something in that athlete of why we picked that player at 10, off it. So for me, is he going to get more of a rope than some? Yeah, possibly because of the investment side of it. But at some point, that rope doesn't just keep extending.
Right. Yeah. You have to step in and fill and take advantage of the opportunity. I love you say that too, because I totally like remember that. And as a 16, 17-year-old, like being put off by it. But like when you have a standard for yourself, and I mean, I was one of the better players on the Chiefs and, the kind of the guy at some point. I remember like Mike Babcock in particular would ride me pretty good some games where like, I don't mean, maybe I was productive, maybe I wasn't, but he would be like celebrating somebody else in the lineup. And I'm like, I was way better than him, but I wasn't good for me. You know what I mean? So like talking about your expectations, right? Like coaches see you in a way that they want you to be, and they know what you can do. And maybe I'm playing at 80% that night, and I see it as like, well, my 80% is better than this guy's 100%. Why you should still be liking me, right? Like again, an immature, but I guess that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Like you want these guys to be 100%. This fifth rounder that maybe comes in, like if he stands out for a few shifts, you're like super pumped because this guy's like, wow, like I didn't expect this from this guy.
That's right. And we do that here. Like I think as a coach, we get done a game. I hardly ever, and I don't mean this anyway, like the Jackson Berezowski knows he got 2 goals and assists. Like the praise goes to those guys that, don't get their name in the paper to me, that we as a team and as a staff appreciate what they did. And the average fan probably doesn't even recognize they had 2 block shots. You know what I mean? Like that were big time timing ones or a good finished check or a guy who, just some of those, things that we really stress as a team that, that player needs. So when we come in after a game, I always get with their staff. I'm like, all right, who'd you like on the back end? Who was the guy that we, that we need to, make sure we give some love to out there in front of his peers, right? Because that's the most important part.
Yeah.
And most teams go with a hat or a jacket you see now after games, and you probably and it's great with our group because it's not always to the guy that gets the 3 goals, right? It's about celebrating to me someone's accomplishment in the game that maybe had his best game up to that point, and it might only have been 6 minutes, but it was a great 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And we needed that 6 minutes. So so we could give these guys the rest and trust him. So and for me, I always tell our guys, I put the highest bar on players differently, and everyone has a different one. But my job is not to let you slip. Right. So you might have had a good game, but it wasn't a great game. There's more here to get. And my job as a coach is to keep squeezing and getting you outside that comfort zone. And then the day I really give you the fist pound and the attaboy is when you're out onto the next into the next part of your playing career. Because our job is everyone wants to be a pro until they realize how hard it is to be one, and the expectations around it and the grind of it. And you got to love the grind. And a lot of guys just want to put on their skates and go score. Yeah. But like we said about Connor Bedard and old Zellweger, those type of guys, they love the grind of it. That's why they're partially where they're at as well, because they put in the work.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And maybe that's a great way to end. I mean, this, as far as the intangibles that you're talking about celebrating, and we haven't really touched on culture, but like building a culture within an organization, like there's foundational pieces that make the culture right, and if you're continually acknowledging or getting excited about somebody who dangled a guy one-on-one and went top shelf, I mean, what does that promote? That promotes individual play, and it promotes, that type of a player. Whereas if you're highlighting the guy who's blocked the shot or had the unbelievable back check, or, kind of these unsung things that make a group successful, that gets people to buy in too. You know what I mean? So I think that not only does that guy feel successful, but it also tells the players what you find valuable, right? Like what do you like, So I love what you're doing there. I think that sounds like you guys got a really good system on the go, and players are lucky to play for you. One thing I will add, though, you mentioned Gary, that you worked with him. I forgot about Gary. Was my very first coach for the Penticton Panthers in the BCHL. So Gary and I go back.
Okay.
I played for him at 15 years old. So he was my introduction to junior
hockey.
Great person. Yeah. Great guy.
When I came in, I got to say this about him quick, was, I came in, he was our general manager here at the time, and he's now with Calgary Hitmen. And so I just saw him at the BC Cup, Alberta Cup, and couldn't ask to work for a better general manager or person. Like, every time he knocked on the door, it was, how can I help? Like what do you need, Willie? Like, tell me, and is it a team builder? Is it like, just help? You know what I mean? Like, he never would come down after a loss. He always come back after a win, because normally, you're in a better mood. But he knew how to pick his time, right? And knew when the coaches were heated, probably. And all right, I'll see them in the morning. They'll be in Saturday morning. I'll come back for a Starbucks, and when then by that time everything's calmed down. Like, so the way he approached it, and I think to giving me the autonomy of running how I wanted to run back here, and not being micromanaged or being told I got to play Dennis and Jason tonight and sit there. You know what I mean? Like, it was so, and not only an unbelievable mentor, but just an unbelievable person and friend. So it's great that we have that connection, because he's still out there doing it.
Oh yeah.
And he's making notes, and I saw him up there when the thing was in Salmon Arm. I think him and Brenda were having the whole Hitman staff over for dinner. I was like, "Where's my invite?" I asked him. So he said it was their staff tonight. So, but he's doing great, and has done an unbelievable amount of great work for junior hockey at all levels for a long time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I echo that. He was watching the AA guys this year. Like, my boy was playing AA there as a first year, and so I saw him in some rinks. Mm-hmm. He ended up coming on as a guest for the podcast too. Really good interview. If you ever wanted to listen to it, it was awesome having him on. And just a great energy. Like, I don't know. I kind of judge people on their energy, on their, like, how you feel when you're around them, and like the things you're talking, like, you just feel good around Gary. Like, he's easy to be around. He's not. There's nothing pretentious about him. There's nothing off-putting about him. He just makes you feel comfortable, and I think that's probably why he's had such a long career right in this game, is that people feel good around him. So thanks for giving him a shout out there. And Dennis, I mean, pleasure. This is the first time we've had an opportunity to speak. I really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah. It was awesome to talk hockey with you for almost 2 hours, and I appreciate your time and sharing all your knowledge with the listeners here at Up My Hockey.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Jason. I wish your boys all the best in hockey, and hopefully we can chat again soon.
We will. Cheers. All right. Thanks for sticking with us. That was a fantastic show with Dennis. Whether you're following this episode just because you are not my hockey enthusiast, or whether you just tuned in for the first time because of Dennis, or because maybe you're an Everett Silvertips fan, or maybe you're a Canadian World Junior fan and you wanted to hear what the coach was all about, I think that we got a great conversation there with Dennis about what he is, what he values, what he promotes, what his standards are, some insights into the game, a little insight into Connor Bedard. We covered a lot there, and if you did stick around to the end, I think you got your money's worth today with the conversation with Dennis. Dennis, if you are listening to this, or if somebody close to Dennis is listening to this, please thank him for me. I thanked him at the time, but it's awesome when somebody will step out of their day, right, their life, their routine, and donate their time, which I believe is everybody's greatest resource. So for them to for Dennis to donate his time to us, the listeners of About My Hockey, and to me, to give back to the game, to provide knowledge and value to those who are listening, to make our game a better place, what more can you do? Right? What more can you do? So I applaud Dennis and his efforts here. And yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll see Up My Hockey and the Everett Silvertips working together here one of these days as well. It seemed like there was a lot of synergy between Dennis and I in the way in what we believe and how we believe to find success. So it's interesting having these conversations, how you can kind of connect, feel that the energy is right, and I think that there might be something there in the future with Everett and the Silvertips and Dennis. So wish nothing but the best for Everett this coming season. I know some players on that team. They're going to be a lot stronger this coming year, so watch out for them, and we will be following them as I'm sure a lot of you will be out there as well. So until next time, play hard.